And welcome everyone to episode 2 of Isabella Spanglish, where we talk about art and culture and thinking in different languages at the same time. My guest today, I'm so excited to share with you. Um, because I have known her since we were kiddies. Ana Maria Caballero, who is an author and a poet and who greatly inspires me. Her first book, tell me, is it the first book is coming out soon? A Petit
Hello.
Mal.
Should I jump in? Sorry, there's this
Jump in. Yes, of course.
thing going
Jump
on.
in. Please go ahead, jump in.
My first book is actually it was published in Colombia in 2014. It won a national poetry prize, and it's called Entre Domingo y Domingo, from Sunday to Sunday, and that was published in 2014. Then I have a chapbook that was published in 2016 by Finishing Line Press in the U.S. in English. And this is my first nonfiction full length manuscript, which is getting published by Eyewear Press out of the UK.
That is so exciting. And can you tell me about that journey from getting this manuscript, which is very personal, right? Out there into the open. What was that like for you? I mean, the whole process of writing it.
Well, the process of writing it tells the story of my son's illness. He was diagnosed with epilepsy 2 years ago, and it tells the story of how the seizures started, how they were diagnosed, misdiagnosed, diagnosed, misdiagnosed, all the alternative medicine that we tried before settling into a medication, and fortunately, attenuation, they call it, which is when the symptoms disappear, which means basically his seizure stopped 2 years ago. And I wrote it while it was happening. And I didn't really know what I was writing as I was writing it. It was very much a part of what I was living. We weren't really sleeping because my son was having night seizures. So, I would have like wake up when we had a seizure in the middle of the night, and then I couldn't sleep, and I would write, and I wasn't even tired. It was pure adrenaline. It was a 2 month period between when the seizure started and they escalated until we found the right medication. So I guess I just lived off adrenaline and coffee for those 2 months, and that's when the book was basically written. And then the process of editing and sending it out was much slower. I am doing a master's program in poetry at Florida International University, and I was actually taking a lyric essay class when my son's seizure started. And I started writing sort of the pieces, thinking, oh, I'm going to just submit these for my homework. This is just going to like complete the requirement to pass the class. And they just kept growing and growing into a book. And my professor, Julie Marie Wade, who's this wonderful poet and essayist, she's published like 12 books. She was the one really who encouraged me to organize it and keep going and make it into a book, and then advised me via an independent study the following semester as to how to start submitting it, which is like a very grueling process that I don't know if you want to bore your readers with or your viewers with.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry. I mean, I'm fascinated because the fact of creating art is one thing, right? Is usually done in a very particular mindset, whether, like you said, you evoked that you weren't really conscious that you were going to make a work, a whole personal large work out of this. You just started writing and couldn't stop. And may I say that I have read it and I think it's spectacular. It's spectacularly written. I really, really hope that everyone who gets to listen to this, and whoever, every parent really, gets to read this book. So tell me again a little bit more about when it's coming out. It's called A Petit Mal. That's right?
Yes. So a petit mal, which is a poor way of saying a little bad, but it's not really what it refers to. A petit mal is a type of seizure, actually. So there's this old way of naming seizures, which were grand mal seizures, which are kind of like the poltergeist seizures that people have in their heads when you name epilepsy or when you name seizure disorders, where the person is writhing with the eyes rolled back, and you got to be careful about the tongue and all these things that we're kind of told that get trapped into our mind. Those are grand mal seizures. And then petit mal are just all sorts of smaller, quote unquote, seizures that, the person's, like, for example, absence seizures, whereby a person will kind of just get distracted in a way and will miss minutes of conversation. And you can't even tell the person is having a seizure, but their brain is actually seizing. Those are a type of petit mal seizures. And my son was having petit mal seizures, which he was basically laughing. His seizures were laughing seizures, which made them even more eerie than they already were. At least they began as laughing seizures. But now they're not really called grand mal seizures or petit mal. There's all these other sort of more technical names that have been given to them by the International League of Epilepsy, which is a real world organization.
That is, it's something when you're talking about the terminology, it brings me back to your book in such a vivid way because you discuss, in fact, the terminology for something that's so heart wrenching, right? And I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, like you kind of are going into the territory of like the absurdists, like, post World War II Europe, absurd theater, absurd writing, the existentialists, like this idea of it's almost nonsense to have to face these like I don't know. I remember that. And then just the whole kind of the medical way of trying to deal with this that they don't really know about that's so mysterious, which is the brain, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that angle, because it's not any laughing matter, but there is something very absurd about the process and the naming of it and the technicalities and that kind of thing.
Well, the medical world, it does feel like you're trapped in a Kafka novel, because you just can't really believe that such language, such way of speaking about the body exists. Yet it's sort of the most professional way, at least in the Western world, that we've come close to naming and to understanding disease. And there's lots of sections in my book that deal with this, about just the alienation that you feel when you're sort of trapped in the real world of medicine, which is a parallel world to the world that we normally live in when we're not faced with illness on a day-to-day basis. But it's completely absurdist, and it's not funny, but at the same time, at least for us, finding humor in the absurd was a form of relief, and privately laughing at some of the stuff the doctors were telling us. I'll give you an example. The first hospital that we went to, they had no idea what our son had, and they basically gave us this medication that was highly toxic. And they're like, here, just give it to your kid. And if the seizures go away, then we'll know they were seizures. And, it's funny, but it's also very disturbing. So I do think that you touch upon one of the major themes of the book, which is the challenge of naming a reality that is just surreal.
Absolutely. And I have to say, one of my favorite parts was when you were talking about how there were some papers that they needed from you, but they could only get them from you if you faxed them. Like, who has a fax anymore?
Nobody.
No one
Doctor.
has a fax. Why do doctors even put fax on like their header of their stationery?
I know. It's because of all this like HERPA legislation that's meant to protect you Um, but my experience was that it just makes your life miserable, and that there's ways around privacy that don't involve fax machines.
Right.
Like documents can be encrypted when they're emailed.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
anyway, it's mind boggling how difficult we've made getting answers in the medical world. And granted, our son had a very the brain is very unknown. It's the land of the unknown. But even, I've spoken to moms and experience with doctors and other forms of illnesses, and it's a pretty generalized reality of how complex the medical world is to navigate when you're, in the vulnerable state.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is fascinating, and I don't want any more spoilers because everyone should read A Petit Mal. Do you have any idea when it's coming out? Is there a date potentially?
It's coming out next year. The publishing house, like I mentioned, is in the UK, and they were locked down for most of last year, so their publishing schedule is basically behind quite a bit. So
I've
we're
heard that all over in publishing that people have been doing nonstop writing and the publishing houses can't keep up with all of the manuscripts. So yeah, for
so
sure.
I'm hoping next year. But definitely, I will be in touch, and I hope to be back on this wonderful space to talk to you about books and literature and your projects as
Me
well.
too. No, but
Let's
wait a minute. Okay. Then we'll get the date when we get closer to that time. But first, what I wanna actually go back with you because I remember being in junior high school with you, and just this wonderful friendship. And then of course I went away to high school somewhere else. I left Miami. I went to New York, and then the years passed, and I get to see you again with your two beautiful children. And I really want to know, what is the path that you've had with poetry? Like, how has it been part of your life? Was there an awakening? Was there a moment where you're like, I have to do this? Was there a moment as you were growing up that I didn't know about, that you were always reading or singing or writing things in your head? Tell me about that.
Poetry was always kind of a private life for me. I never really envisioned making a public life out of it or an outward life out of it. For me, poetry is sorry. For me, poetry has been just kind of like a nighttime night table companion. Um, but that changed recently. That changed as as you grow up and you realize that you're not going to be young forever. There's been a new urgency in getting my work out there and in joining sort of a community of writers where I long to be in. So I think that um, I think I started late, is what I think. I think I could have started earlier, but um, but I had ideas of how being in the world looked like that have changed very dramatically as I've aged.
And was it a particular book or a particular teacher or life event or something that was like, okay, I've got to do this, I've got to write this down, and I've got to get this out?
Well, not really. I just never stopped writing. So I published my first book, I guess, in my early 30s. And it's a very 20s, like drunken 20s poetry. Of That's my book in Spanish. It's about being single in Bogota and sort of brushing up against this city, which is it's a very fun place to be for anyone looking for a fun place to go to in their 20s. Bogota is definitely one of them, I would say. But that fun does not come with a price, and there was sort of a corruption that came along with it. That's at the center of my book. Um, and then the next book is about being a young mother, like a first time mother, and my father's illness when it first emerged. And now this one, this one, a petit mal, it's, it's, I guess, more middle age writing. It's always accompanied me. I'm working on a manuscript that I'm about to finish, and start sending out of poetry as well. That's more of, just themes of domesticity and of expectations that revolve around, being a woman, who is told, that we can have it all. But what is really the price of having it all? And what does that all mean? Is all just another word for exhaustion?
I
So that,
love that you said that. I feel like I'm cutting you off after a really, really important stream of thought, and I feel like the listener is gonna kill me. But that I love that you said that because that is one of the main themes of one of my favorite TV writers, who's Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Of course, she goes about it in a very wacky and slightly creepy way, but she's having clearly a conversation with society and with the viewer about what is expected of us and what do we expect and what makes us happy versus this notion of how people want us to be able to perform but with excellence and on every level. I don't know, what do you think about that?
I think it's a lie. And I think it's a lie that women, are guilty of telling as well. I don't think it's external only. I think that we also sustain the lie within ourselves and among ourselves. And it's made, once I've realized sort of the extent to which, um, a woman's energy can go toward perpetrating that lie. You have to be very careful about how you spend your time, because it can really be consumed so easily by being a good mother, a good wife, a good friend, a good citizen, not even to mention a good worker, right? A good employee, a good daughter, a good sister. And what that goodness means, if that goodness really is measured by self sacrifice.
I love that you said that. So when you're saying lie, what I'm thinking is, when I'm listening to you, is this idea of, yes, you're actually putting out tremendous amounts of energy to perform on all these levels, but also there may be, I guess, people, maybe not really myself, but a lot of people who are tempted to keep up appearances about how well they perform in all these different things. Or maybe it's just because I live in Miami. I do get the feeling that there's a desire to want to fit into some kind of um, appearance of a life that's expected.
I
Um,
think the key word is performance. You
mhm,
keep saying
mhm.
perform, and I agree with you, but I would take it to the level of performance. And how, like, as women, sometimes we just don't even talk to each other about how, sometimes it sucks to, take your kids to soccer class because you have work to do and you want to write. And yes, maybe this is a problem of privilege to be able to take a child to a soccer class. But at the same time, sometimes it's not what as an individual you would like to be doing. Nevertheless, it is what is expected of you, and you're supposed to chat during the soccer class. I mean, all these levels of womanhood that get sort of exposed, when you're a young mother, trying to make art or trying to create, a company or any kind of work that doesn't revolve around family and society, or social. I guess not so much society, but being social. When you're just not happy by those or satisfied by those spaces, um, there's no really a place to voice it. And I also feel that when I have voiced it, um, people are reticent to accept it. But then there's also like these collapses that I've seen around me, just collapses of exhaustion and manifestations of unhappiness that I think could be prevented by just being more real. Like just
I think
saying, hey,
that is so interesting because yes, it is finite, right? Our energy. I mean, there are only 24 hours in the day, and you know, now everybody says you got to sleep more, not less. So, you know, okay, so peel away 8 good hours from that, and then you know you need to eat, and so you know what have we got? We've got you know what 8 to 10 hours,
nothing, you get nothing.
right? So, but is it because when we say I need to do this artistic endeavor that may or may not be lucrative or whatever, profitable, at least. Does it come across? Does it smack as selfish? Is that what it is? Do you think that people get the idea like, how could you spend your time doing something that's just for your benefit, ostensibly? What do you think?
um, I think that things of pursuits that are solitary are not understood in general.
That's very interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, you're the only one who can make your art. Nobody else can do that for you.
And it requires a lot of solitude. It requires a lot of space. It requires not only physical space, but head space.
Mental space. It was absolutely. And no one to this day, I don't think anyone, except for maybe a couple of old people know a lot of things sometimes. Nobody understands why I moved to South America when my son was 2. They were like, you should have stayed in Paris because Paris is, you know, a place where you become famous, not like Chile, which nobody cares about, you know. I mean, including Chileans. Even Chileans were like, "You're dumb, girl."
I know. Why are you here?
And I'm like, "No, because it's a headspace. It's a mental space where if I know that my son is okay, if he's with someone that I trust,
Yeah.
because he's with my mother or because he's with my cousins or something, I know nothing's going to happen to him, type of thing. You know, more than you know in any given circumstance all over the world, but still, it's the safest place I can put him while I create something." Um,
I think that's very brave, Isa.
how sweet of
Very brave to leave a place like Paris.
you know,
Go to Chile.
I've never put those 2 words together. I've never put those 2 ideas in the same sentence. But thank you. That's enormously cathartic. I will now, do a little skip on my way, to pick up my son at school. Um, I was just gonna say, first of all, thank you because this has been so much fun, chatting with a dear old friend that you are, and a wonderful writer and poet. And now I feel like I'm on backlog because I've got to read your book in Spanish and in English. So before we go, I would like to know what is your favorite word in Spanglish or in Spanish? That's my one little gimmick before we go.
Oh my goodness.
I know. It's hard, a favorite. It's like a favorite child, right? You can't do that. But anyway, first favorite, second favorite?
Let's see. Um, what do I like? I mean, I'm thinking of what I say to my children when I'm yelling at them. So say no más,
No más.
no más, basta, um,
Basta is a good one, I have to say.
basta.
Basta
Yeah, basta.
is a relief. Just to say it is a relief.
I know, right? It's a good one too. And then also things we eat, but I don't know if that even counts.
Oh, sure it counts.
I don't know. Like today, we had arepas for breakfast, and just saying arepas in the morning with my kids feels good.
It brings joy, doesn't it?
Yes,
That is so cute. You know, I had an arepa with eggs this morning. So clearly we're on the same wavelength. I want to say thank you to you. I'm not going to take any more of your time. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your weekend and lots and love and hugs to your kids. And I hope you come back and join us again on Spanglish.
I would love to, Lisa. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
You're
Big hug.
welcome. Big kiss.
Okay, bye.
Bye.